Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for joining us here today at a physical event. It's a great pleasure to actually see everyone in person. Congratulations to the organizing team, to Ashwini, and for everyone at TIE for putting this together. I'm missing my co-chairs from last year, Karan Mola and Sujata Salvan. We put together a pandemic-proofed India Internet Day last year, but it was unfortunately virtual. It would have been nice to be able to see everybody, but I'm glad that we could do this today. Let me call on stage my fellow panelists. You can see them up on screen, but we're going to get them onto stage as well. Deep, can we have you join us on stage? Of course, the godfather, the gangster of the Indian internet world, Mohit Bhatnagar, Managing Director at Sequoia. Mohit, can we have you up on stage? And Mukul, Arora, the co-managing partner at Elevation Capital. Gentlemen. Perfect. You want me to sit in the middle? Okay, cool. No, it's fine. No, it's perfect. So I think the stage has been set. Kalyan has put together all the data for you. It was a sobering sort of start of the morning. We've also had our co-chairs take us through what the reality at this point in time looks like. Today we are here to discuss the state of the ecosystem, the good, bad, and the ugly, so to speak. And let's get started with exactly that. I'm hoping that this panel here is going to keep it as real as possible. We don't want to get bogged down by too much by way of data, because I think that's going to be put forward on every panel that you are going to witness here this morning. But the signs are very, very clear. If 2021 was a record-breaking year in many ways, then this year is going to be a sobering year. We don't know how long this winter is going to last, how severe this winter is going to be, but these are tough times, and startups are going to have to negotiate their way through the turbulence and through the volatility. There are many unanswered questions at this point in time, and I think, I was messaging a friend as I was sitting there behind Mohit, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm at the India Internet Day, and he sent me this forward which said that there was an art exhibition on, and a first-time exhibitor was showing his work, and there was a acclaimed art critic in the audience, and he asked the young artist, he said, would you like my opinion on your work? And he said, yeah, sure, please go ahead. And he said, well, it's worthless. But he said, yeah, but share it anyway. So with that sobering thought, let me get started. And Deep, let's start with you. We've got the data in terms of what happened through 2021, and which is why the topic of choice for the India Internet Day last year was escape from velocity. And this time, of course, it is riding the wave. But between 2021 and 2022, there have been significant changes, more global than domestic. As you look at what's happening around you today, what are you most worried about? What are you most concerned about? Let's start with the bad.
Can I start with the trivial?
You can start with whatever you like.
Okay, one of the very significant changes which happened on this panel over the last couple of years is that Shereen moved from a BlackBerry phone to a full-on smartphone. So things are happening. The internet is really...
I finally gave it up like last year, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if someone's been living under a rock, it's probably Shereen. I don't know how she does what she does. But more seriously, I think Ashwini called it right. It's more riding the storm or in the face of the storm than it is a wave, for sure. And that's what this topic is here. I think first everyone should know that what's happening in India is not India-specific alone. I think Kalyan, if you were paying attention to his slides, called it out really well, where he said that there's a problem in the macro. In the global economy, there's a slowdown, firstly. That was clear, right across. All the estimates have fallen from 3 to 4% down to like 2 to 3%. So big drop in the growth overall. There is, there's real inflation everywhere. I think if you read about inflation right now everywhere, and most of it is, I think, because of monetary policies, which is happening, but also supply shock with the war. And that's hurting everyone. You read the headlines, what's happening in Europe, and people are just talking about galloping prices for energy and gas. So it's playing out completely like the cascading effect. So I am worried that if we don't come out of this fast enough, I think 2024, then I think we have a real problem. And I'll tell you why. So the way I like to slice this is early stage, the good news. I really think that's the good news, good, bad, ugly. So that's definitely the good news. I don't think anyone gets impacted in India in early stage in a big way, and both my co-panelists out here know much more about this, but let me stick my neck out. Simply because I think early stage funds are fairly committed towards India. Those funds have been raised. They are for India. They should happen, right? That's good news. I think growth capital is going to be a much bigger challenge because that, I think, I call it fungible capital. I don't think it's dedicated for India. It can move quite easily here or there. And then obviously what's happening in the markets, you need more time. You have to push it out. Our chairs called it out. Like how does, like Mayank said, how many months more can I take? How much do I have? So I think people have probably, good companies have enough for maybe 18 months, 24 months, some prudent companies, a lot of them between 12 to 18. And if they don't manage their finances well, which will mean cut down on growth, and we don't get out of this cycle by 2024, I think, pardon my French, but the shit is going to hit the fan. Yeah. So.
Well, let's hope the shit doesn't hit the fan, and let's hope that we don't see a winter that takes us all the way to 2024. But to the point that Deep is making, Mohit, and let's address that issue. And I think the good news is, and that is the silver lining, that early stage capital continues to come in, and that is good news for people sitting in this room who are getting started. But on growth capital, it's not just the macros, but it's also the fact that funds themselves are struggling. Whether you look at what's happening with SoftBank or you look at what's happening with Tiger, when you see that kind of reset, it's not a recalibration by any standards, it is a reset. When you see that kind of a reset, what will it mean? What will the implications and the impact be?
So hi everyone, good morning. Shereen, I think I disagree with Deep, just to put it out there. I feel like all of this should be looked at relative to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And when you start looking at a relative picture of India versus the rest of the world, we come out looking much better in any downturn. And you look at this year itself. First 6 months, we had close to $20 to $30 billion of late-stage capital that left the country. And in August itself, we had 3 weeks where close to $5 or $6 billion came in. I actually think the tide is turning. I actually think the world has got enough capital. They're going to be looking for places to deploy it. It's going to be going to a few places. It's going to be going to the places that can return and have long-term return potential. And I think India shines out in that. There's not a single company out there in the world who's not trying to diversify away from its dependence on China. Global supply chains are getting reimagined. Phenomenal opportunity for India across every category. Is it easy? No. Is it going to take a lot of capital? Yes. Is it going to take a lot of great entrepreneurs to build high quality products? Yes, yes, and yes. The path's not easy, but I think the world is looking to see us succeed. The world is going to provide the capital. That's the easiest part. The hard part is getting it done.
Yeah, that is always the hard part. And yes, to be fair, we have seen a significant amount of capital. I mean, we had on Friday, on the FII side, a buy number to the tune of almost 5,000 crores. So I get what you're saying. And hopefully we're going to see strategic money continue to come in as well. Are you somewhere in the middle, Mukul?
So, Shereen, I think obviously since morning we have heard, if anyone had any doubt, are we in middle of a doom and gloom? Kalyan made it very clear. He's taken all doubts away. Having said that, I do want us to step back and see what has happened over the last 10 years. Because sometimes in these periods, it's very easy to get lost in the noise and lose out on the big picture. And if you look at last 10 years, right, 2012 versus 2022, 2012, we were at 100 million internet users. Today, we are at 6x of that. 2012, we were at 2 billion e-commerce market. Today, we are at 30x of that. It's 60 billion. 2012, I don't think any of us expected that SaaS coming out of India would become so large. We were all bullish on the India consumption story. So SaaS total revenue out of India was less than 50 million. Today, it is $4 billion. So if we look at where we have come in the last 10 years, I think all of us should take a moment to acknowledge what we have achieved and the trajectory that we are on. I don't think we should lose sight of that picture. And then therefore, if you look at that trajectory, I think next 10 years, things will only get better because we are probably the only geography where the tech penetration has happened ahead of consumption growth. So we are still at a 2,500 per capita income that will go to 5,000 over the next 8, 10, 12 years. And if you look at US versus China, China had economic growth and tech growth together. So therefore, the tech economy was larger. In India, economic growth will come after tech penetration has happened. So therefore, the tech economy is going to be even larger. So if I look at 10 years out, we are going to be so much stronger given all the fundamentals in place. So, no, I'm not in the middle. I'm firmly in Mohit's camp.
You are very firmly in Mohit's camp, and I think that you know, I appreciate the fact that you've given us that 10-year perspective as well, because it is important to note. And we have seen significant changes. We've seen some of the enabling, you know, drivers that you spoke of, which have come together to ensure that this ecosystem actually is much more robust than it was a decade ago. But let's just continue to build on that aspect. And there is absolutely no doubt, and I heard you speak as well, that this move towards digitization, this move towards the internet, etc., is irreversible. The question is, you know, are we going to go through that kind of peak that we saw through COVID, or are we going to see some degree of normalization happen, which we're starting to see at this point in time? But the assumption, as Mukul and Mohit both said, is that India is poised to grow, whether it is 6.5% or 7%, we can quibble and argue about it, and the internet is going to continue to be the big growth driver. So in that sense, it is advantage India today, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, so I really don't want this to be like a TV debate, and I don't think you normally do this, Shereen. So I don't know where I said that India won't do better than the world. Like, so thank you for putting that spin on it. Of course, there's no doubt. I mean, look at what the McKinsey CEO today has said. He says, why next decade belongs to India, next century? Yeah. And my repartee is, of course, aap ho gaye wahan kya 100 saal baad kind of thing. But no, of course, I mean, come on, our demographics are all, I mean, we are in the sweet spot, and you called it. Yeah. There's no question that we will gain. My point was what I'm scared of. You asked me what am I worried about.
I agree.
And I am worried about that. I have to be honest with everyone out here. Like, you know, don't take capital as though every 12 to 18 months I'll be able to raise the next round. Yeah. Don't. That's my frank and very candid advice to young entrepreneurs. I tell anyone who I meet right now, be really mindful of the capital you're getting right now. Build a bigger cushion, and you know, this winter might be longer. So, see, I think it's very easy also sometimes to say, and I want to, you know, I'm happy to be on the other side with my two friends here, all of you maybe. It's very easy to say and take an approach saying, we are better than the rest. Sabki lagi hui hai, but we are better than everyone else. Meaning, that's like, I don't think that's a very smart thing to do, honestly. Because there are other places which demand capital too. Yeah. So the capital could easily flock to industrials, I mean, I'm not saying India growth will come down. The point is, will our audience out here, which our focus audience is entrepreneurs, particularly young entrepreneurs or early stage entrepreneurs, will they have a comfy ride for the next few years? I think it's going to stay bumpy. That's my fundamental point.
No, without a doubt, yeah.
But, and therefore, you know, we should not just rely on it that it's going to be easy sailing, is my point. Demographic, of course we'll win. Who can even debate that today? But what Mohit has called out is a great point, that we have not capitalized on what we should have with China going through their tough times right now. We just haven't. And will we? I don't know, honestly. I mean, I'm not that bullish about us suddenly getting our act together. Some of these things have happened. And like in IT in India happened despite the government. I can't say that for the internet. I don't think we give enough credit for what we've got, the UPI stack, the India stack, and I think that, you know, I think Kalyan really put out a good slide. It's incredible what we have in India. We all travel, we all know what's happening in other parts of the world, and everyone else is backward when it comes to payments. The US, I mean, the US gets so excited about Venmo, but Venmo you can only do if two people have a Venmo account or Zelle or whatever. In India, we're like, I mean, we all know how we pay for Pani Puri now, I mean, everything has changed and we take it for granted. We are so advanced on the stack. So I think there's some things we're doing very well. Will it all come together? I sure hope so. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's a fact. We don't really know. But to your point on UPI, today, in fact, for the month of August, we've touched a new record high as far as UPI transactions are concerned. But we need to be mindful.
Shereen, do you use UPI?
No. Okay. I don't. But you know me. I'm not the. Hopefully. No, but you know, to Deep's point, I think we need to be mindful of the fact that we cannot take for granted that capital is going to come our way. We cannot take for granted that growth is going to necessarily deliver on the 7.5, 8% aspiration that we have for it. We need to ensure that lots of pieces come together. But let's talk about the regulatory environment, and let me start by asking you, Mukul. what you make of it at this point in time. There's a lot happening, not just in India, but globally as well. We've seen the crackdown in China, even in India at this point in time, whether it is gaming or education, the government is saying, look, we don't know if self-regulation is going to work necessarily. We might want to intervene. We've seen what's happened with crypto. The taxes come in. There is still uncertainty on what the law eventually will say. Will there be one or not? So on balance, when we're talking about the State of the Union from a regulatory perspective, what do you make of it?
So, couple of thoughts there. First, I would 100% agree with Deep on the overall role that government has played, and I was in a room with our Honorable Prime Minister last year. I haven't, the happiest he was when someone called him the startup Prime Minister. So he genuinely feels about that cause. And that shows up in the government's action. Having said that, overall, as you know better than anyone else, our government's focus has always been on protecting consumers' interest ahead of everything else. And therefore, even our financial services, our regulation have been the most stringent at times, but that has helped us well through the cycle. So there are times when it feels like, hey, why are we holding ourselves back? Yeah. But then when the whole world blows up, we thank the RBI that thank God you were so strict. And I think that's what the government is again doing. Wherever they do feel consumer interests are not being taken care of, they are stepping in. Is it always the right answer? It's always find a happy medium. But I think overall, given how early we are in some of these journeys, consumer interest has to be taken care of. That cannot be let go, because in the long run, capital cycles will come and go. But if the customer experience gets lost, if people lose hope or belief in technology, that's the worst that can happen. So therefore, I think overall, our regulation has done a good job of finding that right balance. And from an overall government perspective, they have been very, very supportive.
Okay, so you believe that there is a balance there. We're anecdotally hearing about this flight of Indian entrepreneurs, especially as far as the Web3 and the crypto space is concerned, out of India to other jurisdictions as well. Do you believe that this is a trend that we should be watchful of, pass through the anecdotes and the data, what are you hearing?
No, I don't think so. I think if there's one big win we've all seen over the last 10 years is, remember we used to talk about this thing called the brain drain and how all our IIT bright minds used to end up in the US and the MNCs. That's completely shifted, as you know. I think it is a desired outcome for the best people, the best students, the best entrepreneurs to sort of create businesses in here, because the growth's here, the future is here, and there's more dislocation and opportunity in all the mess and chaos that we have around us as well. So I don't see that as a big flight of great entrepreneurs. As far as the crypto thing, yes, there will be some countries who will try and be opportunistic and will try and use this opportunity to make it easier for people to build businesses in there. I think our Indian government, like Mukul said, is very mature and very balanced in the way they do it. Unlike many others who just come out with outright bans. I think these folks, they provide the right guidance, the right bites.
Well, they almost went there and then pulled back.
To your point, but they almost went there and they pulled back to the point where they're still dampening the enthusiasm so that the end consumer doesn't get hurt, but they're going to allow it to sort of, bubble up, allow it to sort of bake, allow it to see what it becomes before you actually take a hard policy against something like that. So I think it's a balanced policy. It's hard. None of us really know where crypto is going in the next 5 years. Why would you expect the bureaucrats or the government to have the most insightful, thoughtful perspective on it? They're just being balanced about it to see, put in some frameworks, some guidelines, allow folks to experiment, innovate, but, make sure that they don't cross lines that hurt people.
Yeah, I agree with you. And speaking of maturity and speaking of hurting people, Deep, let me address the issue, which I think is an important issue to address. There was a lot of euphoria when we saw new listings from the Indian internet space, from the Indian entrepreneurial space, head to Dalal Street. And there is a crisis of confidence at this point in time. Two questions. Do you believe that the Indian market, the Indian retail investor, is ready for loss-making companies to go public? And B, what are the lessons to be learned in the light of the experience that we have? How much has this hurt sentiment? Are we going through a crisis of confidence?
The short answer to the first question is no. I don't think the Indian consumer is ready for that. No consumer in the world, in the market, is ready for a dip, which is in a period of months, a few quarters after listing, 40, 50, 60%. But it has happened. But it's also happened in the West.
Yes.
So that was my point. It's not unique to India. It's just that we're not ready for it. We don't, I think, have the appetite for growth companies alone. We are PE-focused market. Let's face it, I have gone here and, you know, we're not listed here. We'd like to list here and we are thinking about it. It's not something that we don't want to do, but when we listed in 2010, the Indian market wasn't ready for an internet stock, definitely not for an e-commerce stock, which is clear even today. One is the ups and downs. B is when I go and meet you know, analysts in Bombay, I meet investors in Bombay, and I ask them, they are actually still very focused on EPS, very focused on PE, which works for us today, but I can't blame these companies either. Now, someone, in hindsight, which is 2020, someone guided / misguided some of them to say, you're ready to go out. I don't think they were all ready to go out clearly. Ready to go out means, do you have a very predictable business model first? You're not profit making today, but are you going to be profit making in, like, I can see it, like 2 years, not 3, 4, 5 years. Like I'm saying actually 1 to 2 year kind of story. That's the Indian market today. It will change. The pools of capital very often are the same, right? So the origin of the pools of capital. So it will change over time. But this sobering has come not only because of India. This sobering has come because of, I think there's an international impact. We're also coming out of it. You're also seeing some very good stocks which are managing to ride this. Why? Because you look at their business model. The business model fundamentally is more stable. People can predict revenues. The market really likes to see, you know, comfortable, solid predictions which they can rely on. That's what they want. They don't like choppiness. So managing retail investor is entirely different from managing private investors. I mean, you know, I've been there. We've been in that journey. We've had investors. It's a board. Most of your investors, if they have more than 10% stake, will have a seat on the board. You'll have discussions and you'll say, yeah, okay, we are consciously going ahead for the next 8 quarters. We'll keep making losses. We need this much capital. We have this much. Let's raise more. We'll come out of it. That takes maybe, you know, a few weeks and one board meeting, and it gets done, and you go ahead and you start executing on that, and then things change. But you convene formally once a quarter, informally maybe once a week if things are really crazy, or once a month, you convene and but with the retail market, you don't get that opportunity to explain. You get the opportunity once a quarter to explain what's happened, what's gone wrong. Neither do you have the time, neither do they. And they will not get into like, why did this happen and all. It doesn't happen that way. You report and that's your earnings. So I think we're still very early. This is a good learning, I think, for everyone. And what kind of companies should go out and when you should go out, I think.
Yeah, so it may not necessarily be a bad thing. You know, the headlines today are about who has decided to pull out, who has decided to hold, who's decided to pause. But to Deep's point, given the market conditions, given the maturity of the market, as well as given the maturity of business models that are attempting to go public, do you believe it may not necessarily be a bad thing to take a pause?
Yeah, I think it's a journey, Shereen, isn't it? I'm going to just, I came across the women's basketball coach at Duke, you know, pumping up her players last week. And it was there on YouTube. And she says, we got to get better at heart. And the point she's making is, it's not going to get easier. If you think, you know, you're going to become a better basketball player by, you know, it's going to get easier, it's not. You think once you finish Duke and you go to the real world, it's going to get easier, it's not. And the point she was making is what's going to get better is you being able to deal with the tough times. And that was an interesting learning for me is, you know, why should we expect the market to suddenly have a lot of capital or for it to become easier to go public or for companies to be able to naturally get a larger market for their, you know, for their product or service. I think what's really happening is through this whole IPO experience you talked about, our companies are hardening. They're learning how to deal with a whole set of new constituents, which are the public market investors, the retail investors. To be fair, many of these